Juneteenth Houston presents The Juneteenth Story, an Enduring Legacy. From Matagorda, Brazoria, and Harris counties, from points south, east, north, and west, the good word began to spread. Some 2,000 United States colored troops, known as the USCT, would arrive on Galveston's sandy shores, sent there to enforce Executive Order No. 3, read by Union Officer Major Gordon Granger. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This is the story of June 19, 1865. The Juneteenth story begins 1 year later in 1866, an important distinction that comes into sharp contrast as we examine the events that led up to Texas's Freedom Day. Juneteenth, a timeline. From the founding of the country in 1776 to the start of the Civil War in 1861, there are several major historical events that give context to what took place June 19, 1865. From Jefferson's 1808 Act ending the transatlantic slave trade to Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831, the deepening divide between northern and southern states as a result of the Dred Scott decision in 1857, which, in effect, confirmed the legality of slavery, was brought to a head in part by abolitionist John Brown's failed attempt to lead the enslaved of Harper's Ferry, Virginia, into revolt. 3 months after Abraham Lincoln was elected president, the South responded with secession and war. An incomplete freedom. The Union's victory at Antietam allowed Lincoln to issue a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22, 1862, which freed all enslaved people in the Confederate States after January 1, 1863. As a result, there were many emancipation days between 1863 and June 19, 1865. In fact, those commemorations would become an important part of the abolitionist movement, which sought to end chattel slavery and liberate the millions still held in bondage across the country. That goal was not fully realized until December 6, 1865, when the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, which legally ended slavery in the United States. By the time Granger read the order in Galveston, 3 of the 5 remaining slaveholding states had already abolished slavery through their legislatures. However, Delaware and Kentucky would sustain the so-called peculiar institution until the 13th Amendment took effect in December 1865. When the slave trade was abolished in 1808, Texas became a safe haven for slave traders. The common belief is that it took 2.5 years for news of slavery's end to reach Texas. It did not. News of emancipation had certainly reached the Lone Star State in 1863, but with no Union presence to enforce the law and no urgency to relinquish power or profit, Texas remained a holdout. Nevertheless, to paraphrase historian Blair L.M. Kelly, freedom was always on the mind of the enslaved. From last to first. June 19, 1865 does not mark the end of slavery in the United States. It marks the legal end of slavery in Texas, the last Confederate state to free enslaved people from bondage. While Granger is often evoked in Texas's Freedom Day, It is documented that USCT soldiers, Black soldiers, were the true liberators, translating for their enslaved brothers and sisters not only their freedom, but their rights and responsibilities as citizens. The path from slavery to freedom would take the over 250,000 formerly enslaved to all parts of the Lone Star State, including the area of Houston that would ultimately become known as Freedmanstown, site of the first Juneteenth observance. Located in the city's 4th Ward, Freedmanstown quickly became the major hub of Black life in Houston, a thriving community built on a foundation of determination and cooperation. The first Juneteenth celebration was a grand affair, including but not limited to processionals, dances, a barbecue, and a ball. According to an 1866 newspaper article in Houston's Daily Evening Star, 3,000 to 4,000 freedmen attended the festivities. Then, in 1872, residents banded together, steadily chipping in their pennies, nickels, and dimes until they finally amassed the $800 required to purchase a parcel of land that would serve as their official communing place of Jubilee. Their annual observances of freedom forever bonded by a moniker of both sight and intention: Emancipation Park. The legacy continues. 154 years later, Emancipation Park remains the premier site for Juneteenth celebrations in the city. Juneteenth Houston, a collaborative comprised of Houston's leading preservation and cultural heritage organizations, artists, and community members, was formed to not only commemorate Juneteenth, but to do so collectively. And in its founding in 2022, made Emancipation Park its chosen site as a means of honoring the legacy of the ancestors, their sacrifice, their resilience, their fortitude, and their joy. While most of the country had never even heard of Juneteenth, Black Texans, Black Houstonians, have been observing and celebrating for over 160 years. The reporter of that same 1866 Daily Evening Star article, written the day after the first Juneteenth celebration ever recorded, closed with this affirmation: While most of the country had never even heard of Juneteenth, Black Texans, Black Houstonians, have been observing and celebrating for over 160 years. The reporter of that same 1866 Daily Evening Star article, written the day after the first Juneteenth celebration ever recorded, closed with this affirmation for the freedmen. Quote, "May each anniversary of their freedom find them better prepared to enjoy its blessings, appreciate its privileges, and discharge its responsibilities." End quote. So it is, and so it shall be, for the legacy continues.